There is a common psychological theory that if you isolate a group of teenagers from civilization, they will eventually descend into a state of violent, animalistic savagery. In 1966, this theory was put to a real-world test. 6 teenage boys were discovered on the uninhabited island of Ata, a desolate volcanic rock in the Pacific. They had been missing for over a year. But when rescuers reached the shore, they didn't find a group of warring factions or evidence of violence. They found a structured society with a garden, a permanent fire, and 6 healthy young men who had kept each other alive through sheer cooperation. This case study provides a rare data point for researchers, offering a direct, documented contrast to the theoretical models of social collapse that dominate modern fiction and psychology. The story began in June 1965 in Tonga. Bored and frustrated by the rigid rules of their Catholic boarding school, 6 teenagers decided to sail 800 kilometers across the ocean to find a new life in Fiji or New Zealand. They were almost entirely unprepared. They stole a 24-foot wooden sailboat and set out with no map, no compass, and only 2 sacks of bananas and a few coconuts for food. None of them had any experience navigating the open sea. On their first night at sea, they were hit by a massive storm. The winds shredded their only sail and snapped the rudder, leaving the small boat at the mercy of the Pacific currents. For 8 days, they drifted aimlessly. With their food gone and no fresh water, they were forced to catch fish and drink the raw blood to stay hydrated under the tropical sun. Without a functional boat or a way to communicate with the outside world, the boys were now completely cut off from the social safety nets and laws of civilization. On the 8th day, they reached Ata. It is a volcanic plateau with sheer rock faces rising hundreds of feet from the crashing surf. There is no sandy shoreline, only jagged reefs and vertical cliffs. They managed to climb the volcanic crater, where they found the remnants of a village that had been abandoned a century earlier. They discovered feral chickens and wild fruit, providing them with a sustainable source of food. Starting a fire required intense physical effort. A boy named Kolo spent hours rubbing sticks together until his hands were raw and bleeding, eventually producing a single spark. They made a pact never to let that fire go out, keeping it burning for the next 15 months. While they had secured the basics for biological survival, the longer-term threat was the psychological toll of isolation and the potential for internal conflict. To maintain order, they worked in pairs, rotating through 3 shifts: foraging, guarding the fire, and standing watch. They also developed a system for conflict resolution. If 2 boys argued, they walked to opposite ends of the island until they calmed down. Beyond physical survival and labor, they had to address the mental health challenges of their isolation. They realized they needed ways to keep their spirits from breaking during the long, agonizing months of silence. They fashioned a makeshift guitar from a piece of driftwood, a coconut shell, and wires salvaged from their boat. Every evening ended with music and prayer, creating a consistent cultural ritual that kept the group connected. By adhering to these self-imposed rules for work, justice, and social bonding, the teenagers avoided the internal power struggles that often characterize smaller, isolated groups. Their social structure faced a crisis when Stephen fell from a 50-foot cliff. He suffered a compound fracture, a life-threatening injury in an environment with no antibiotics or doctors. Conventional survival logic suggests in a resource-limited environment, an injured member unable to work becomes a burden the rest of the group might eventually abandon. Instead, the boys set Stephen's leg using sturdy sticks and vines and kept him immobile while he healed. For several months, the other 5 boys took over all of his duties, ensuring he was fed and cared for until he could walk again. When Stephen eventually recovered, it confirmed that the group's survival was based on a system of mutual aid and shared responsibility, rather than individual competition. On September 11, 1966, Captain Peter Warner noticed a patch of burned forest on the island and moved closer to investigate. He was stunned when 6 boys swam out to his boat, identifying themselves as the Tongan castaways who had been presumed dead for over a year. Their return was bittersweet. While their families rejoiced, the owner of the stolen sailboat pressed charges. As soon as the boys stepped off the rescue ship, they were arrested and placed in a Tongan jail. Captain Warner intervened again, paying the fishermen for the lost boat and selling the story rights to a television station to secure the boys' release. He later hired them as permanent crew members on his own vessel, the Ata. The boys of Ata Island demonstrated that when humans are stripped of modern civilization, our most effective survival strategy isn't a descent into violence, it's the ability to organize, empathize, and cooperate.